Yay.
All right, we are now on record. So any questions from anyone? Sam, I see, sorry, Sam, I see that you have written here to ask what Andreas is talking about. He is talking about the font lightness in the study notes, that it is too light to read easily. And I have also come to that conclusion, so we will review that. Sorry, Trudy and Steve, I interrupted you there.
No, that's all right. I have a question about the elephant's foot being a digital grade. Is that just because the bone structure inside the foot is all the toes fused together and standing, I suppose, like that inside the foot?
Yes, you are correct there. So it is to do with the bone structure and the fusing of those bones.
That's all I
have. You answered your own question there. So how did people find, I mean, I know these first two lectures, if you did Megan's course, they are a little bit of a review, but like we spoke about, tracking is something that you actually really have to practice and persevere with. And if you do have a tracking book, you will find that you're looking up and referencing the same things again and again. And basically it's creating, I guess, well-run neural pathways so that you can have all that information at your fingertips. And the more familiar it becomes, the more you are able to access it. And when you are out in the field, you will be able to bring it to mind. And if you study by pictures, you'll be able to remember what things look like, and you will end up being a better tracker.
On that note, do you have, I haven't seen it in the literature yet, but do you have a recommendation for a really good tracking book?
So there are quite a few, and of course it depends which part of the world you're going to. So I'm assuming you're asking me for Southern Africa, because obviously you will have species that exist in East and North Africa that don't exist further down.
Right.
On that opening page of each of the lectures, you will see 3 books. One's called On Track, one's called Scats, I think, and one's called Tracks. Now, you can buy books that cover all of them, Tracks and Signs, or, you know, Tracks and Scats. Aha, there we go. If Flo, can you hold that up again? So that's Tracks and Signs, and that's a very good one that combines them all. And again, oh, both Flo's, Florian and Flo, you both have it. Now, those are quite large. Hold it up again, Flo, because if you want to fit something into your back pocket, you can actually buy one that is smaller and easier. And Sam, we can't see yours because it fades into the background. But also now there are fantastic apps that you can get. Now, some of them you have to pay for, but it is worth paying for it. Just remember though, if you do have your smartphone in the bush, that you have a backup battery source if you're going to be checking all of these. Here we go, On Track.
On Track.
It up. And those fit into your back pocket quite nicely. So there are, Robin, a whole load to choose from. I think we are more and more swapping to apps, you know, for your bird calls and your tracks. Also, I have seen people out there with a Kindle Fire or a tablet, because you can access all sorts of reference books. So
where's the apps? What would be your recommendations? Because I know there's so many that like some of them might be better than others.
Well, coming from East Africa, I think our recommendations might be a little different, but I would say anything by Chris and Matilda are good. They're very well done. Galen, do you have any suggestions there?
Honestly, don't. Sorry.
Sorry, Holly, just quickly, this one that I've been using for a while is very easy to refer to, and it's a good reference. It's Eastern and Southern Africa, and it's light and it's small. Obviously, the bigger ones have got more information, but I've used this quite a lot, and I've found it very, very, very helpful.
And I would agree with Vivian. If you're starting off, I think it's a good place to start with that. a light book. Otherwise it overwhelms you. You have to remember when you're learning that you have to learn in bite-sized pieces. And if you take out a book that's enormous, you're overwhelming yourself. You might not think you are, but you are. And it's the same when you're working from home. You only have the things visible to you that you have some knowledge about. If you pile all your books up on your desk, it's already there in front of you telling you how much there is to learn, and it doesn't help the learning process.
Right. Thank you.
Did anybody go out and practice some tracking in the last few days or since you've started the course?
I was walking my dogs on the beach, and on the seashore I saw some bird tracks.
You're
So I
coming to
tried to
birds.
identify them. Yes.
So I think what would be wonderful is for us to create some sort of online photo album with all your tracks photos, or perhaps a Facebook group where we can post track photos and then we can each try and guess, because I think throughout this course it might be a very valuable thing to do. So I wonder if I might allocate that task to someone to create a Facebook group for our tracks and signs here. Anyone? Sam, thank you. I'll leave that to you. And if you don't want to be included in it, that's fine. I totally understand the desire to get off Facebook these days. So just let Sam know if you just message her now, and I will let everyone know in an email, and they can opt in rather than opt out. So once you opt in, I will get Sam to add you. All right, anything else?
I did have a question about the vocalization section.
Yeah.
There was at the very end of that section, it said that you should be expected to identify basic vocalizations, I think. And in this section, you guys showed, or you did audio of a male lion and a lioness, and said that there's obvious significant differences. And while I have some experience listening to them in the wild and whatever, I wanted to find out what you expected us to get from the differences, since individuals can kind of blend together, you know, like a really serious lioness can sound a little bit more like a less serious lion at times, or distance and all these things. So I wanted to know the details of what you guys wanted us to get from that.
Okay, well, I think you're quite right on that, Robin, in terms of like a very serious, as you say, female lioness can sound like a male lion playing around, not quite being serious.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what we want you to get. This course is definitely not set out to make you a master tracker, because we can't do that virtually. That requires experience, I mean, some of those master trackers have been going for 40 years, you know. So this course is to really give you an awareness of how important tracking is, and for you to be able to build up those skills. So if we go back to the male and the female lion, when would each be calling? So, you know, if you know your area and you're working and you're staying in that area for a longer amount of time, you will know when your resident pride has made a kill, when was the last time they ate. And so you should be able to deduce, even before thinking, oh, let me listen to the sound, you should be able to deduce, well, is the male making a territorial call? Listen to that call. If that call is moving, so each time you hear it, it sounds a bit further away or somewhere, then you can assume that it could be either the male or female, but they're moving and they are either calling to make contact, so that's a contact call, or they're territorial calling. If it's a male lion, there will be no reply often. If it's a female lioness, I should say, then you may hear a reply, or it won't be so, it won't move exactly in one pattern. It will just sort of maybe come back on itself, or she will come closer or go further. Whereas the male, you will hear him in a specific pattern moving away or down a line. And the male calls are often much deeper, and they have sort of a grunt at the end. I'm not about to attempt a lion call on Zoom because I think the explosives will go mad. But yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing with calls, guys, and be this carnivore calls, bird calls, frog calls, you know, I remember growing up, and, you know, my brother and I were very competitive about our calls, and it would involve sitting in your room and listening to a CD again and again, and you'd hear, you know, African reed frog, and then stop, and then you'd have to listen to it and guess what it is. And this was on and on and on for hours and hours and hours until you know those calls and you're out there and you can hear them. The more you hear those lions calling, the more you will A, be able to identify them with individuals because you'll know who's in what territory or who's moving, or B, you'll be able to identify them with pride. So you may not get the individual or the sex, but you'll know what pride it is. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah, thank you.
I think in order to be a good tracker, don't be worried about being a weird geek, because you do need to learn the calls. And the only way to learn the calls or the tracks is to go over them again and again and again.
Very good.
Holly, there's a question from Lee in the chat box. Lee, you might just need to clarify your question about making a track trap.
I don't know if anyone has ever done that before. If you have access to a piece of land that is not going to be disturbed by too many things, and you want to see what wild creatures or maybe a dog walking by or the neighborhood cat, you can take a piece of string and make a big circle and put sand or pull back all the leaves so you can see the soil, so you have a good place for the footprints to go, and then put something in the middle that will attract them but isn't going to be something that is hazardous. You don't want to put a piece of meat in the middle. You'll get the wrong kinds of guests, but you can put seeds, or if you get a can of sardines, you can open it and spread some of the oil in the middle, and then you can go check it every day and see who comes, and then wipe it clean again and see whose footprints come.
Yeah, Lee, it's a fantastic idea, and something that we, you know, when we're out in the bush, you can brush the road, the entry road. You just tow a Hessian sack behind the car, and it brushes into the it brushes the dust down so that you can have these tracks and see. And now once those tracks are there and you want to learn to age tracks, then think about keeping a few tracks and seeing what they look like 12 hours later, 24 hours later. And also, yeah, and like Andres is about to say with the weather and everything, if you've got a, you know, sort of wind, what's the effect on the track? Because aging tracks is pretty difficult, and that does take time to learn, and you do that in a trap. Right, any questions? We've just had Barb and Mickey come in. Any questions from you two?
No, I'm just now in, so I had problems with the internet. I was waiting and waiting, but now I'm on. Okay. Everything is perfect. Thanks.
So, does anybody sort of, I guess, watch any tracking movies, or not movies, but clips on YouTube, or follow any trackers? Because there are some fantastic people out there who do it for your country, be that the Americas, well, North Americas, UK. There's a fantastic one by the UK Woodland Trust. Even in South Africa, Malotti Conservancy does some good tracking videos. So do have a look, and if you are interested, some of those could be posted into the Facebook group if you want to follow some of those videos. And I will be linking to some of them in the following, so next week, or from Friday evening when the new lectures become available, you will see there's some extra material, YouTube clips to watch. Of course, they're not compulsory, but I think they are very beneficial. And I've tried to get a couple from each country that people are from, or at least region.
Yes, that would be good, because at the moment it is a little bit like learning a language without having somebody to talk to.
Yeah. Do you have any dogs? You need to get them to start communicating in tracks to you.
No, it's just terrible weather outside here. And well, actually today was good, but there's a lot of leaves around. And if you walk in the forest, you won't, well, I don't see anything.
No, well, I think you're going to very much enjoy the next few lectures that are coming up. We've definitely enjoyed creating them for you. And, you know, in teaching a course like tracking, it's an interesting concept because, you know, I'm not a master tracker. I haven't been out in the bush for 40 years. So, but I know what I'm looking for, and I know how to get that across to you. And I hope that'll come through in the lectures, and that you're going to get inspired and go out and actually start to find some tracks wherever you are. And if you're in a place where you're going to get snow this winter, then that's a good way to start tracking, because snow tracks are perhaps a lot easier. Mud's pretty good as well, if you've got that. So. Anything else that you feel that you'd like to highlight from the last two lectures that you found really interesting and perhaps you'd like to know a little more?
Hi, Magog. Charlie. I'm just curious around rubbing post. I'm just curious whether too much information is worse than too little, in regards to tracks and signs.
So you broke up a little bit there, Charlie. So you're asking me if with rubbing posts, perhaps there's too much information and it's a bit overloading.
Yes, too much information. Because I understand that that's where a lot of animals would sort of drop by and leave hairs, all sorts. So is too much information as bad as too little, basically? Okay,
so that I see what you're asking now. So if you have to decide, if you're going tracking, are you tracking a specific species? So have you got a species in mind? Perhaps you know there's a male black rhino in the area, he's a newcomer, and you want to see what he's doing and who he's socializing with. So then you already should have an idea of the size of his tracks, and you should be able to have some sort of idea of where he's moving. Perhaps you've caught it on camera trap, and that's how you know the size of his tracks. Because individuals, like for example, when I was working in Botswana with Wildlife Act, we had a leopard with a wonky toe. So every time we saw, of course we called her Wonky, every time we saw Wonky's track, we knew it was her because that toe was funny. But if you catch an animal on a camera trap and you really want to focus in on that individual, then measure those tracks, write down all those measurements. How to do that is going to come up in the next set of lectures next week. And then if you get to that rubbing post, you should be able to discern, if the rubbing post is not too busy. Let's say the rubbing post is at a waterhole. Then yes, Charlie, you're right. Loads of animals will be using it. There will be an overload of information, and you may not be able to discern for the exact animal you want. But if you find a rubbing post that is specifically at the right height for a rhino, and you come across ones where a giraffe's rubbing his face, and no other animal can reach that. So you can realize that that's a giraffe, or a warthog specifically, that kind of height. A forest hog, again, will be a little bit higher. So then you can kind of find the individuals you're looking for. Or do you set out tracking just to teach yourself the art of tracking? Well, then it doesn't matter if there's an information overload, because you look at that and then you test yourself by being able to discern small things that are there. You don't have to know it all. You just sort of pick out the tracks, you know, pick up the pieces of hair or fur that you can see, perhaps feathers, and work on IDing that. But like I said, you know, with learning and the psychology of learning, too much information is going to overload you. So if you are in that position and it's not working for you, then it's not working for you. You know, it's like looking at a 1,000-piece puzzle and you lay all the pieces out, and some people can just find the pattern and put them together, and some people it's harder, and you need to kind of take out all the edge pieces first and do the edge, and then choose the blue pieces and do the blue pieces, right? So tracking is the same thing. You kind of choose what you're able to put together, and tracking is building a story. So being able to put that story together as to what happened in what time sequence is important. And that's a wonderful way to learn. And a wonderful way for you to practice building stories is to tell stories. So, you know, don't just say, I saw a rhino at a waterhole. Well, great. You know, if you want to know what was that rhino doing? When did he get there? Who did he socialize with? What time did he leave? Did he chase the Egyptian geese? And then that builds a story which will tell you more about the tracks and the individual. Does that answer your question, Charlie? Anybody else?
There's a question in the chat from Oliver, and Sam has also posted some really great links that are worth saving for everyone who wants to look at those. But there's a question from Oliver.
Okay, there's suddenly a lot of things here. So free download to a tracking book. Oliver, would you be able to elaborate on the feeding sign differences between the cats? Specifically, obviously, if the carcass is up a tree, it would be a leopard. And if you mentioned that cheetahs feed more delicately, but would you be able to elaborate a bit more? Okay, so if we were to look at how the predators kill their animal, so the first thing you think about is how do they take the life of that animal? If it's wild dog, that's pretty messy, and sometimes you will see actually that the wild dog will almost tear an animal apart while it is still alive, and that animal is sort of, you know, torn apart and dragged all over the place. And it is, if you've never seen something like that before, it is quite horrific. So in terms of spotting a wild dog kill, you're not going to find that the animal's been throttled. If you find something like a cheetah, which it's a more delicate bodied, has more of a delicate frame than a leopard, which is very sort of muscular and toned. So the cheetah is going to be more careful making that kill and will try immediately to go to throttle the animal at the neck. And then you will have bite marks. Then leopard and cheetah will remove the insides and not necessarily eat the stomach. Leopard will try and move that kill up into the tree as one place. So leopards are very interesting because they basically form habits that are very different. So anyone who tells you these are the general habits of a leopard, don't listen to them, because it totally depends on where you are. So for example, I worked in an area in Western Uganda on the Tanzanian border, and there is one lion, one single lion in that entire area, and he's old. So the leopards have absolutely no competition. So there is absolutely no reason for them to use trees, unless they specifically, it's too hot a day and they want to get the air movement around them to cool them down. They won't use trees. So you will find a kill on the ground, or you will find a kill out in the open, because there are no competitors for that. So how would you know that it's a leopard kill? Well, I guess if you were new and you didn't know there was only one lion in the territory, you would look at it and say, okay, well, how many animals have been feeding on this? Now, quite often, of course, lions are in a pride, and so you're going to have more than one lion feeding. They will often feed as much as they can and then lie not so far away. Like, don't ever get out at a kill site and before you've really looked around, because very often the lion are all lying in the grass in the closest shade, full, waiting to come back, you know, to get more of the kill. or to chase off hyenas and things that come in. Whereas a leopard, you know, will have dragged that carcass if it can into the shade. Generally, leopards definitely won't eat in the sun unless they really are trying, they know that there's competition in the area. So, and that does happen. So let's say a leopard makes a kill and it knows there's a lion in the vicinity. It will eat as much of that kill as possible and leave, because it cannot afford to come into conflict with those lions, because it probably would come off second best. Now, we have seen an incident in Botswana where the cheetah had made a kill and were feeding on the kill, and it was a mother and her son, and they were sadly not observant enough. And next thing, a male leopard came out, killed sadly the young cheetah, and took over the kill. So now let's say you found that kill. How would you know that that was fed on by cheetah or by leopard if it was a stolen kill? So, you know, one of the things Megan talks about in those 2 lectures is never jump to conclusions, because you might not know the whole story. So just kind of think about it in terms of, here is one version of the story. It might not be the correct version, but it's as close as you're going to get until you start looking for other tracks and signs and seeing sort of what's around. And then looking, Oliver, at what parts of the animal have been eaten and what parts have not been eaten. And, you know, sort of if there's damage on the outside, like claw marks, what's the spacing of those claw marks as well will give you a clue. I mean, there is so much to go into, and it would be fascinating if which we are trying to get, you know, we're trying to collect a lot of video footage for this course, and it's ongoing. And so if we do get some kill sites, we will show that to you nearer the end. Does that answer your question, Oliver? Not sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. We have another message. Oh, perfect. That was you. Yeah, so there's some good links in the chat box there. If you want to click on those to get some of the downloads, then please do. Anyone else with other questions? You know, there are also a lot of sort of signs that are not observed. You know, for example, with the increase in mass tourism and the ability of people to take photos and record things, there have been a lot of unusual sightings. You know, for example, hippo eating impala. You know, a hippo actually coming out of the water and catching and killing that impala and eating it. You know, that has been seen. Now, we don't know how frequently that happens, but those types of things, I like your reaction, Galen, those types of things are being recorded more and more. So one of the things that I was taught very early on by a safari guide called Stretch Ferrero, if any of you ever have the opportunity to go on a safari with Stretch Ferrero in Zimbabwe, please do. And he said, never look at a situation and go, that's not normal. Because what is normal? We have a collection of thoughts that we believe to be the most common behavioral traits. For example, black rhino, they're unsociable, they're generally quite aggressive to each other. But the more and more evidence is collected, might actually prove that to be wrong. And I mean, rhino have been found, black rhino, in herds of up to 27 at watering holes. So they obviously know. Oh my goodness, Flo was supposed to go to Mana Pools with him in May. Well, that is a real shame you missed that with Stretch Ferrero. He's incredible. But yeah, so don't just look at something and go, that's normal or not normal. Look at it and try to create a story and think, why is that happening? Or why could it possibly happen? And especially that counts for relationships between species. You'll find sometimes, you know, I've seen a pelican and a buffalo that are obviously working together, and the buffalo, you know, the pelican had a missing leg and the buffalo would help the pelican to the water. you know, each time. So why is this happening? We can't explain it, but is it normal? We don't know, because we're not seeing enough to make definitive decisions on what's normal and what's not normal. Yeah, someone said on the Fagasa course, animals don't read the books we write about them, so expect the unexpected. And that, Lee, is very, very true. Does anyone else have any stories they'd like to contribute or anything? Very quiet out there with you all on mute. Cynthia.
Oh, well, I accidentally unmuted myself there, so no. I'm just enjoying listening to the discussion and learning as much as possible.
Some more stories would be great. Sam, it looks like with your background that your hand is constantly up.
Yeah, but maybe I can tell something about my background picture.
Yes, please.
Because that was taken in Mfolozi when I was there with Wildlife Act in 2017, and we were collecting the SD cards from the camera traps, and we were lucky to have a clear, open, sandy patch, and that was one of the tracks there, and I just thought, okay, this is the chance to get a perfect track on camera. And first I had my foot next to it, and then I thought, oh no, maybe just take my hand. And yeah, for me it's the perfect picture to describe, you know, we're all together and we are not so different. So yeah, that's the background to the picture. So, and now the question, what is it? I will just leave the frame.
All right, everybody, I'm going to call someone to guess. Tim, you're smiling away there. What track do you think that is? You're on silent there, Tim.
Oh, my iPad is not so quick.
Mark, do you want to have a guess at that? Tim's having problem with his iPad there.
Well, the 3 lobes in the main pad indicate it's a cat, so that's the start. There is no claw marks, so it's definitely not a cheetah. And then the size, because it exceeds the size of the palm, it would be a lion and not a leopard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also wanted to talk about no claws, and I think, well, when it's your hand, I think this is over 10 centimeters, so then it must be lion.
You can come back in your picture now, Sam.
To be honest, I really took my hand and just checked how big my hand is. But yes, I was told, and I would also guess it's a lion. If that is not true, we all have to talk to Fee, because she told me it's a lion. Yeah, but yeah.
Now, I don't know, one thing that all of you, if you're into, and it's something I certainly quite enjoy, if you go onto the website Africam, they have live web cameras all over Africa in the bush, well, all over Southern Africa in the bush, at waterholes and things like that. So in terms of watching animal behavior, it's a fantastic place to just see what's going on, as well as, and I don't know how many of you jump on a safari with Safari Live. Do any of you do that? Also quite good fun.
Sometimes.
I just had a quick question about photographing tracks. Sometimes it's real hard to get, be able to see depth, and, with light angles, you might not be able to see claw marks and that kind of thing. And I know, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but Antoine Marchal was with Wildlife Act for a while, and he's doing a big push for 3D photo, I'm not sure what it's called, like photo analysis that gives it an even deeper understanding. And he's, you know, he's got a big project on that. So will we be talking about that at all?
That's a massive subject, and it's interesting you brought it up, because I had a discussion with a friend of mine who is actually a treasure hunter. So he works with the ocean floor on these, you know, flying ROVs, remote operated vehicles, sort of basically creating 3D imagery of the ocean floor in areas where supposedly treasure ships sank, so that they can find this treasure and bring it up and obviously score big with it. And he has been talking about helping on a project that he heard about that is doing 3D tracks. I think on this course we're not going to cover it because it actually isn't helpful to you learning right now. It's fascinating and it's definitely worth following if you do follow someone who's doing it. But I think on this course we're going to go into other technologies and technologies that are going to be useful for you if you're going to go into the conservation field, whereas knowing how to 3D map a track when you could go out into the bush and make your own plaster cast is really not a learning tool right now. But yes, it is further on.
Okay, thanks.
And if anybody has never made a cast of a track, then you should do it. Just do it with your own foot, or, you know, buy some plaster of Paris and make a cast.
I have another question.
Yeah.
We're actually thinking of coming out next year to be a volunteer on some of the courses that Wildlife Act got going at the moment. And with regard to recording the tracks and the wildlife, do you rely on the individual's cameras, or is camera supplied, that type of thing?
I'll pass that to Galen, really.
Steve, that's quite a mix. So there are a lot, it depends on what reserve that you're on, but there are a lot of camera traps that are deployed at different times of the year. Some reserves have more camera traps than others, but part of the volunteering job is to collect those SD cards and to go back to camp and to sort through them. But at the same token, a lot of the extra material comes from people on the back of the vehicle that are taking their own photographs. So the monitor is driving the vehicle and there might be an unexpected sighting, and the people that are better positioned on the back of the vehicle who take their own photos, those can often serve even better as what's captured on the camera traps. So absolutely, if that answers your question.
I can just say, I don't know how many pictures I took in the time I was on the back of the vehicle, because I just had my camera just on and just did a lot of pictures. So
that
yeah.
contributed, that were pictures that helped the whole database and the whole monitoring process.
I actually saw
So the bottom line is the more the better, and you know, a camera trap might get a photo at a unsuitable time, but someone on the back of the vehicle might get the prize-winning photos to add to an identikit or
Right.
to the
Understandable.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you can't take enough photos when you're in Africa. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I actually saw one of the photos I took in Makuzi in the marking section of our lecture. So that was fun.
Oh, good. But guys, just to come in on that in terms of, and I know more is better, and I know it's all information collected, but there are two things to be aware of. And one of the things that I see from people having just arrived in Africa, and especially let's specifically focus on tracking, is that tracking, like we said, is a skill that takes practice. It's one of those skills that needs 10,000 hours, right? If you're going to be very good. Now, if you're focusing with your camera and getting your, your settings right and your depth perception right, and is that, image going to be good? You're not necessarily focusing on learning the track. You're multitasking, and multitasking in the psychology of learning, which I am quite into, does basically detract from actually learning what's there. So, if you are going to come out and all these photos are fantastic, but for you yourself, you should try to have at least one day a week where you leave your camera and your phone at home and you focus purely on learning, not on other people's cameras, not on images, but actually being out there and writing down with your notebook and your pen, or listening, using all of your 5 senses. So that's my first point. And my second point is all of this data that's collected, you must remember that now, your cameras automatically add GPS tags to these things. A lot of actual point and shoot cameras do. And if you're loading up all of that information, poachers or people who have less fantastic motives for coming out to wildlife, they see all that attached information. And you have to be very careful what you're loading up, or where you're loading it up, or who you're sharing it with. So please keep those things in mind, and please be sure that you're doing the right thing, because part of educating, in where are we going with conservation of wildlife, is the sense that we don't want to preach to the already converted. You are all environmentally conscious, but sometimes it's the unintended side effects that cause issues. So like Sam said here, switch off the GPS when you're tracking. And if you're going to take pictures, it's fine. It's a way of learning. Create your own little, track book. But, the photos that you take of tracks, unless it's an amazing track, you're going to have a better one in your track ID book, and you're going to learn better with that. Because how often are you going to look back at your sort of out of focus, maybe not quite the best photos of tracks, and actually learn from them? You're going to learn more with that one day a week without your camera. That was a sudden end, but who agrees? So guys, I think we're kind of sort of getting quieter and quieter here. So I see Lee saying, learn photography when you want to learn photography. Exactly, being a photographer is actually, well, we're all photographers now, but it is good to practice your photography skills at the same time as learning. But it's also good not to try to multitask too much. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And like I said, you will find that the next week's lectures will come available on Friday evening, as well as the study notes. Andreas, I will try and deal with the font lightness, because I agree. And yes, I think that's all. Is that all from everyone?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Magog.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.